I've professed my undying love for one game series on this channel already, but there's more room in my big weeb heart for another, and that series is Persona. I've loved the Persona series and Atlus games in general since I was first introduced to a game that I'll get to later on this channel. So imagine my delight when I discovered the legends behind that series were working on a brand new IP in the fantasy genre, with this as their proof of concept. I know the elf craze has struck the anime world the past year or so, but this one, she had me at first glance. metaphorrefantazio is the latest project from Atlus's newish Studio Zero, with a lot of expectations riding on it. And I can say without a doubt my expectations have been shattered. This game is incredible. It's so good, in fact, that I would say it's probably one of the best JRPGs ever made. The game mechanics, story, and characters are among Atlus's very best, and I think every JRPG fan owes it to themselves to give this game a try. Now bear with me here because the story has quite the setup. The story of Metaphor is set in the United Kingdom of Uchronia, a country rife with social and economic unrest. On top of the pretty blatant racism and class system, giant monsters called humans have been wreaking havoc on villages throughout the kingdom. Not only this, but the king has been murdered, and the prince is under a spell that's slowly killing him. You, being the prince's best friend, are rightfully pretty pissed about all this. So you, along with your fairy friend, Gallica, head out on a mission to assassinate the man who's messed with the royal family. Things quickly get more complicated from there. It turns out the king in his dying breath casts a spell that decides the next ruler based on a popularity contest of sorts. Whoever holds the most favor with the citizens of Uchronia will now be crowned king at the end of the year. Now you must travel throughout the lands to gain followers and find a way to stop the curse from killing the prince so that he can retake the throne. So the story of Metaphor goes in some crazy directions with lots of twists, especially in the latter half. It's a fun adventure with plenty of memorable moments. The game also isn't afraid to tackle some pretty hefty themes, which is usual for Atlus games, but it's handled with a lot more care here, drawing some apt parallels between the real world and the fantasy one. In Uchronia, your social status is decided by the tribe that you're born into. If you're born with horns like a Clamar, or long pointed ears like a Rusant, then congrats, you're at the top of the food chain. Born with cat or dog ears like a Parapus, or 3 eyes like a Mustari, then you're closer to the bottom. Worship a god the Sanctus Church doesn't approve of? Born as a mixed child? Good luck getting anywhere in the Uchronian society. It's not just about race either. Metaphor challenges a lot of political ideologies that are common in our world as well. Are the wealthy all truly to blame for our struggles? Is military might all you need to run a country? There's far more I'd rather not spoil, but the point is, Metaphor goes into these themes with depth, questioning ideologies from every side of the political spectrum, in a way that feels especially prescient today. The characters in Metaphor are just as excellent as the narrative is. The main character is more than your usual silent protag thanks to the new voice dialogue options. He talks more often and has meaningful things to say when he does. He's sassy and street smart too. All these things together make him feel a little bit more unique and less of a shell for the player to mold themselves into. The rest of the party is just as awesome though. Gallica is a lovable mascot character that you would expect, just don't look at what you've seen about her online. Nurus is a quirky, royal shipwright who's mostly just along for the ride. Hulkenberg is the hungry elf, looking to redeem herself after failing to protect the prince. Stroll is a noble after revenge for his house that fell at the hands of a human. He's also probably the most useful party member of all time. Seriously, this dude always has a plan, and it almost always works. I won't spoil the rest of the party, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the man himself, Luis. Luis is easily the best main antagonist of any Atlus game I've played. Anytime he's on screen, your eyes are glued to him, because you never know just what he'll say or what he'll do next. He's very much evil, but he's also kinda relatable. It's understandable why he's so popular with the people of Uchronia, because while his actions are cruel and reprehensible, some would argue the ends kinda justify the means. Even I found myself agreeing with him at times. All of these characters are written well, but they're brought to life by their voice actors. The performances in this game are unreal sometimes.
You call this real? Leaders abandon their people and the innocent die by their scorn. If that's the real world, then it can die alongside you!
The raw emotion in some scenes and comedic timing in others is perfect. Stuart Clark as Stroll, Matt Whitechurch as Basilio, and Kristen Atherton as Hulkenberg are just a few standouts. I know some sub-warriors will switch to the Japanese voices on Reflex, but I really do recommend trying out the dub. Much like Persona, this game works on a calendar system. The story will progress, leading you on to the next major dungeon. Once you reach the dungeon, you have a certain amount of days to beat it to unlock the next portion of the story. During that time, you can spend your days and nights doing a plethora of things. You can take on mini dungeons, increase your social stats, complete some quests, and build relationships with people around the kingdom. All of this sounds familiar, but what makes Metaphor different is how it contextualizes these activities. Unlike Persona, this is a fantasy world, so you won't be studying for tests or going on dates with your waifu, unfortunately. Instead, you've got medieval stuff to do. Bounties will take you to different dungeons across the map where you'll fight monsters, collect treasure, and obviously claim the head of the bounty for monetary rewards. Quests can send you to dungeons too, but sometimes they're more simple than that, like finding an item, talking to NPCs, or selling your bathwater. Followers and world activities might be my favorites though. Followers work similarly to confidants in Persona 5. As you progress through each rank, you'll learn more about these characters and try to help them solve their problems to lead a happier life in this miserable world. I said before that Hashino and his team weren't afraid to go places with the story, and that rings especially true with your followers. Some of the followers' stories go to some pretty dark places. Things like slavery, death of children, and suicide are all subjects in different follower stories. It's heart-wrenching. These characters are people who have and continue to struggle to live in a society that's failed them. And you'll want to help them out, not only because their tales are so compelling, but because you get perks too. Shop discounts, care packages with rare items, a helper to fight enemies with you in dungeons, and most importantly, new archetypes, which I'll get to soon. Talking to followers and forming bonds ties right back into gameplay. World activities increase your royal virtues, aka social stats. This is important because some quests, dialogue options, and follower ranks are locked behind having different royal virtues at certain levels, which you can finally track the progress of, by the way. Gone are the days of thinking your intelligence will increase to the next level so you can finally date Mitsuru, only to find out that it's still not at max rank, and you'll have to keep studying. Anyway, yeah, you can debate your fellow candidates for the throne to increase your eloquence, or bungee jump to increase your courage. Most interestingly though, you can just talk to random people. They'll tell you stories and give information about the world. Some of the most memorable world activities for me were the Mustari man who talks about what it's like to be deemed a pagan by greater society, and a guy who tells you the story of his father and a fairy who saved him. Atlus was clearly all in on the world they crafted here and give you plenty of chances to learn as much about it as possible, and luckily for me, I found it all pretty interesting. Uchronia is an entire kingdom with multiple cities to visit, caves to plunder, and other landmarks to explore. And you can't get to all these places on foot. This is where the Gauntlet Runner comes in. It's kind of like a yacht with legs that your party uses to traverse the kingdom. When you take on bounties or get a quest that'll take you outside of your current city, you'll need to use the Gauntlet Runner to get there. Traveling isn't instant though. Depending on where you have to go, it can take multiple days to reach your destination. Luckily, much of the things you can do on land you can also do on the Gauntlet Runner, like talking to followers and increasing royal virtues by reading books or just hanging out with your party members. There are some Gauntlet Runner exclusive activities though, like cleaning up and doing laundry, which will increase your health or magic. You can also cook with your party members to get special items that can provide different buffs on the battlefield. As you travel around, there's a chance you might get ambushed by monsters roaming the world, and sometimes competitors for the throne trying to take you out at the competition. I love traveling on the Gauntlet Runner. It made the whole game feel like a long road trip with the bros, kind of like Final Fantasy 15 did. Getting suddenly ambushed and running into kingly candidates made the journey feel more dynamic too. My favorite part though is the sightseeing. Sometimes the party will make a pit stop in a small town or at a landmark. These moments add texture to the world, showing the culture of different regions and many wonders of this magical world. Once you reach your actual destination though, is where combat begins. Metaphor's gameplay is a mix between real-time action and turn-based combat. When you enter the field, you're able to do a melee combo on enemies to whittle down their health and enter a squad battle. If the enemy is low enough level, you can just kill them outright without entering a squad battle too. Squad battles are turn-based fights where you exploit the enemy's weaknesses, but there are a few twists, chief among them being archetypes. Archetypes are an ancient magic that allows you to transform into heroes of the past and call upon their power in combat. And by call upon, I mean ripping out your literal beating heart and screaming until they obey. As you meet new followers and progress their ranks, you'll unlock more archetypes for your party to experiment with. So while everyone starts out with their own, party members can learn any archetype you've unlocked. Multiple archetypes can be studied at a time, and skills from one archetype can be inherited to another. This leads to some really fun character building. Want Stroll to be a martial artist that heals? You got it. Need Hulkenberg to pull aggro and buff the party? Doable. Party composition is super important, especially when going into a strong dungeon or preparing for a boss. If two party members have archetypes that synergize, they can work together to use a synthesis skill. These are your big hitters that can usually change the tide of a battle, usually in the form of a powerful single or multi-target attack. or a huge buff to party members. Making sure your archetypes synergize with each other, providing buffs, nerfs, and damage will make or break you. You'll need it because this game gets tough. I did every dungeon and side quest in the game, and I still got my ass beat multiple times by the difficulty spikes, especially in the mid to late game. Those late game side quests are no joke, man. Be prepared. Some other important aspects of squad battles are turns and formations. Formations are straightforward. Party members in the front line deal more damage with melee skills, but also take more damage from enemies. Party members in the back line take less damage from enemies, but deal less melee damage. Some archetypes require you to be in the front or back line to use some of their skills, so keep that in mind when formulating your formation. I always kept my party in the back line unless they were throwing hands. Luckily, switching between the front and back rows don't cost any actions. Speaking of actions, once your turn comes up in battle, you have 4 turn icons to use, represented by a crystal. Each action you take consumes a crystal, but some actions cost more than others. For instance, using a skill costs 1 crystal, while synthesis costs 2. If you hit a target's weakness, you only use half a crystal, which gives you an extra action. Things can get dicey for you though if you hit an enemy with a skill that they block or reflect. If you do this, you'll lose 1 or all of your crystals, then it'll be their turn. I love the combat in this game. There are so many things to consider, like how to engage the enemy, if at all. I can't lie, a lot of times in Persona I'm just spamming multi-hit magic, so I can find the enemy's weakness and go for an all-out attack. It's a fun, satisfying system of course, but it's also more forgiving, so trial and error is encouraged. In Metaphor, you only have a few shots, and if you mess up, it can spell danger for you. You can restart battles by pressing R3 in case the fight gets too rough, but if you're engaged with the wrong archetypes, you can't freely swap them out like in Persona. Paying attention to your archetypes and your surroundings in dungeons is key to victory. Dungeons can be tricky. Some enemies will get angry if you use certain archetypes, and mimics will try to eat you alive. There are other mechanics I'll let you discover for yourself. I never got tired of dungeon crawling and treasure hunting. Even if I somehow got bored of playing it, I can never get bored of looking at this game. While there are some technical issues like shimmering on edges and character models at a distance, from an aesthetic point of view, this is Atlus at their very best. Menus come to life with watercolor paint splashes and beautiful portraits inspired by medieval European art. In particular, Hieronymus Bosch was a clear inspiration for most of the game's human enemies. Shigenori Soejima is clearly at the top of his game here. I think Metaphor has the best character designs in any Atlus title thus far. I mean really, just look at them. I loved how each race had their own distinct features to them, like how the Ishkaya have long eyelashes and more pointed facial structure, while the Nydia have those big ol' anime eyes with colorful pearlescent hair. It's so cool, man. I appreciate that they didn't go with the typical fantasy route of having orcs, elves, and dwarves. They did fantasy the Atlus way, and that's what I love about it. I've made comparisons to their past multiple times, but Metaphor is both a celebration and reinvention of the things that make them who they are today. The gameplay systems, themes, and the very people behind it. Everything about this game is connected to Atlus's very soul. It's littered with references from Catherine to Shin Megami Tensei to even Etrian Odyssey. The main trio's color schemes are even references to the 3 Persona games Katsura Hashino directed. There's a reason why this game is getting so many excellent review scores upon release. It's touched a lot of people and even nabbed some acclaim at the Game Awards. For me though, it's a unique experience that can and will stand the test of time as one of the greatest JRPGs ever made. It's a game that left me constantly thinking about not just the fantasy world I was playing, but the real one I live in. It's a game that attempts to inspire those that play to work together hand in hand with their community and with their country to try to make things better for not just themselves, but everyone around them.